This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. Global Britain. Remember that slogan? That is what they meant. A policy with no support, and which they then pretended wasn't happening.
Yeah, you heard that right. Full admission from the government in the UK that the administration before them was pushing an open borders experiment in the UK. Holy jumping. Boris Johnson gets us again, doesn't he? Oh, baby. Not that it was actually him directly, but it was obviously his cabinet, people that came in after him that were a big part of this, and I'm sure that he had a hand in as well. This was Keir Starmer. He is currently the Prime Minister of the UK and leader of the Labour Party. He openly came out and admitted to what his administration had discovered of the previous administration was involved in. And many on the right have jumped to the conclusion that obviously it was the Western agenda. This was from the WEF. This was directly from them. There's no proof from this video that this was happening across all Western nations. But that's what we're going to do in today's episode, is we're going to dig into the stats and the trends of some of the major player Western countries and seeing what their immigration levels were like prior to 2020 and then after 2020. Let's dig into it, shall we? Just for goodness sakes, we'll do it for fun. We'll start with the UK. This was their immigration stats from 1964 to 2023. And obviously you can see here, from pretty much 1964 right around 1997, late 90s, they kind of kept their immigration levels between 200 to 400,000 people coming in. And then you have these notes here about the LTIM series and the IPS and the LTIM that was revised. The LTIM is just a revised version of what the IPS was. These are just different ways that they were engaging statistics in the country and how they were counting and calculating their immigration levels. IPS was very survey focused and kind of raw data focused, whereas LTIM kind of took IPS and took it to another level and started being able to leverage other types of research, aggregating different types of data to have a more accurate depiction of how many immigrants were coming into the country. So that's kind of what you're seeing there, is kind of a difference in how they were calculating the data. And that's what's showing here. As we said here, in 1964, right on up to the late 90s, it stayed between 200 and 400,000. Then it started climbing up in the early 2000s, and then the kind of the threshold was typically around 600,000, which stayed between 2003 all the way up to 2012, where you saw a spike in 2013 to 800,000, which kind of became the new norm, all the way up in 2018. So it went to 600 to 800,000 and kind of stayed there. Then COVID hits, and we see a relatively steep drop off. We came back from COVID, so going into 2021 and 2023, you see this huge spike. Boom! The average was about 800,000, dipped down to closer to 600,000 during COVID, and then boom, spiked up to over 1.2 million migrants coming in. 1.2 million immigrants coming in. That's well over a 30% increase. That just jumped within a couple years. Story sounds familiar to ours, doesn't it? But we'll continue on to other countries. So this is something to kind of keep in mind, where what you kind of look at what the norm is, look what the trend line is, and then boom, there's just this weird outlier of a couple years where they just increase the amount of immigrants coming in. Interesting. Fascinating. We move on. What was Australia going through? Well, Australia welcomed more than 2,000 migrants a day in the year to September, helping to swell the country's population by a record 800,000 people, reigniting the political debate about measures to reduce arrivals. Migration arrivals rose by a third compared with the previous year to hit 765,900, driven by international students and workers on temporary visas, while departures slipped to 217,000. The record net annual increase of almost 550,000 comes despite the Albanese government's expectation of bringing migration down from 510,000 to 375,000 a year by June 2024. So even Australia saw an increase by over a third in their migration levels. Again, all within the past couple of years. So much so that as you go through this, there's an article, their political debate was getting heated in their government as well. Almost a similar conversation that was happening during our question periods and was going on between Trudeau and Poilievre. Here it says the coalition has taken up the politically charged issue as a talking point, which is a political party in Australia, with the shadow immigration minister Dan Tehan telling reporters in Canberra that record numbers of people are causing a housing crisis, they're causing a rental crisis. Talking points sound familiar? The anti-racism activist group Democracy in Color denounced the comments, with campaigner Jared Tan saying it is irresponsible to play the migrant blame game for a housing crisis that is decades in the making. Tihan denied diminishing migrants for political gain, but argued that immigration levels must be sustainable and in sync with housing supply. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, told Parliament in question time that the data doesn't take into account the quite substantial action the government has taken to put downward pressure on net overseas migration. Folks, aside from a bit of a change in terminology, you would think we were talking about the same country. Increase in immigration, not keeping up with housing supply, and causing a rent crisis as well. And then the opposing ideology saying, don't be racist. Sounds oddly familiar, doesn't it? Fascinating. So we looked at the UK's numbers, where this information, we were first put onto this information. Essentially, we're taking their immigration levels and we're going to match them to all these different Western countries. So you have UK that jumped from 800,000 to 1.2 million within a matter of a couple of years. Then Australia saw their immigration levels increase by a third as well around the same time. And then you got the US. This is where it gets fascinating with the US. So they're kind of bringing in 1.5 typically since 2000, and then steadily increases in 2010 to about 2 million. Then eventually increases steadily to about 2.6 million people coming in the US around 2015, 2016. Then started going down steadily under Trump. And then COVID hit, obviously, big pillar in immigration. But then it spiked right back up to previous levels under Biden and Kamala. And so you look at this and it's like, okay, there's no real huge difference. This is kind of where things were going for the most part. The difference with the US compared to the other Western countries is Australia's on an island and UK has stronger border policies on the ground. You get what I'm saying? US is a very unique country where they have a significant problem with illegal immigration. So this is the amount that we're seeing from an official count perspective of how many immigrants are coming into the country. But they had a House committee in the White House, and this is coming directly from the White House website. House Committee on Oversight and Accountability and the House Committee on Homeland Security released a report on insights from Border Patrol sector chiefs at the southwest border. And they're saying under President Biden's watch, there have been over 8 million migrant encounters nationwide, 6.7 million of which had been at the southwest border, which means that they are estimating 8 million people enter the country illegally. That's just the amount that authorities came into contact with within the United States, 8 million. So likely there are far more, the number is likely higher than 8 million of the amount of people that have illegally crossed in the United States over the past 4 years. So that's the unique situation in the US is their official documents look pretty normal and on par. But they have the outlier of the fact that the administration opened up the border completely, allowing illegal migrants to come to the country and flooded the country with so many people. They're thinking upwards of 20 million people came to the States illegally over the past 4 years. So that's a huge spike of a number as well. So then we get to Canada. This is what gets really interesting, right? Currently, annual immigration in Canada amounts to almost 500,000 new immigrants, one of the highest rates per population of any country in the world. As of 2023, there were more than 8 million immigrants with permanent residence living in Canada. That's roughly 20% of the total Canadian population. 20% of Canada's population is PR right now. Those are the conversations that have been happening in our parliament over the past year, is how many immigrants and new people were brought into the country at an unsustainable level that can't keep up with housing, can't keep up with medical healthcare, can't keep up with any of the infrastructure we have in the country. That was the question people were really confused about and really concerned about. 500,000, which is a huge number for Canada, huge number for us. Obviously, they said here, is one of the highest rates per population of any country in the world. Let's look at our stats. We, through at least the early 2000s, we've kind of kept this level of 200 to 300,000 people that we've been accepting every year. Then in 2021, 2022, spikes to close to 500,000. 2022, 2023, closer to 470,000 people came in. Almost double, and in a lot of cases, double of what we currently accept in this country. We usually accept between 200 to 300,000. Say 250 have a round number. Doubled to 500,000 people. This trend line looks oddly similar to the UK trend line of the timing of when it happened. There's this random huge spike in the past 4 years. Random huge spike in the past 4 years. What is happening? Now let's go back to the statement from the UK Prime Minister that started off this whole episode.
This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. Global Britain. Remember that slogan? That is what they meant. A policy with no support, and which they then pretended wasn't happening.
Sounds similar, doesn't it? If that is something they have uncovered and found to be true in the UK, that they were trying this open borders experiment, we all know that all the Western countries who are under liberal rule are all walking in lockstep with the same policies. We see Australia go through the same issues. We saw the US go through the same issues through a similar issue, but unique to them. And we see Canada and our immigration numbers and how they all spike at the same time. Australia spiked, UK spiked, we spiked, the US really spiked. People often on the show in the comments ask a question or bring up the issue of all of this is happening on purpose. I think this video that we saw, alongside the data we looked at today, shows that yes, this is being done on purpose. This was an experiment, and we, our people, were the guinea pigs. And as requested, before we end off the show, and the OGs who've been around, we'll finish off with a good old fun wildcard segment that sends you on your way in positive spirits. Check this out. It's still politically related, but it is funny to see stuff that happens in relationships when it comes to politics.
Who broke up with who?
It was on her. It was a text during election night.
A text during election night? Who did you vote for in that election?
I didn't vote.
You didn't vote? Okay. Oh, you're right. Kamala lost by 1 vote. Do you have these text messages on you right now? Results of this election is scary. Trump is winning a lot of states. Yeah, we all agree. I don't believe policy changes much based on the face of the president. No. Okay, listen, guys. He's letting me read his text messages out loud. Honestly, I thought it was going to be a tighter race, but this is a sad blowout. I do think Trump is still going to win. I can't imagine the general population of America would vote Kamala.
Oh, you did.
Facts.
Why not? Because she's a woman? Now this is where you should have consulted a friend. So why not? Because she's a woman, and you simply said, yep. And she said, wow. You said only less likely choice for America as a president than someone of an ethnic background is of the female gender. Honestly, dude, I'm really disappointed to hear you say that. Not saying it should be that way, good for you. What you said really fucking pissed me off, and it was sexist, and it gives into the fucked up patriarchy we live in. Our personalities are too different, goodbye. And then you just wrote back, bitch.
Oh, what a time to be alive, right? It sucks when you see relationships end over politics, but that was a nice, funny way of seeing it all go down. Anyways, hope you found this helpful. Have yourself a great day. I'm out.